On TV, pressure looks like confidence. It looks like smiles, celebrations, control. But that's not what it feels like. What you don't see is the moment right after the lights turn off, when the crowd is gone, when the noise fades, and you're left alone with expectations that don't sleep. Pressure isn't loud. It doesn't scream at you. It sits quietly and waits. It shows up when you're winning and people expect more. It shows up when you're struggling and people expect answers. And the worst part is, it never asks if you're ready. On TV, they show the shot going in. They don't show the thought that comes right before it. The fear of missing. The fear of confirming what people already think. The fear that one moment could change how you're seen forever. You learn very quickly that pressure doesn't come from failure. It comes from importance. The more people care, the less room you have to breathe. Every move becomes a message. Every silence becomes a statement. Every mistake becomes a headline. And at some point, you realize something that no broadcast will ever say out loud. The pressure you don't see on TV is heavier than the pressure you do. And once you feel it, you never watch the game the same way again. From the outside, it looks simple. You play well, people cheer. You struggle, people criticize. That's the deal. But what TV never shows is how quickly that deal changes once people start expecting greatness instead of hoping for it. At first, attention feels exciting. You feel seen, validated, like all the work finally mattered. Then one day it shifts. You notice that a good game doesn't feel good anymore. It feels normal, expected, like the bare minimum. And a bad game that doesn't feel like one night. It feels like a question mark placed over everything you've done. So that's when the pressure really starts, because now you're not just playing the game. You're playing the version of yourself that people have already decided you are. You're protecting an image, a reputation, a standard that keeps moving higher. On TV, they call it confidence. Behind the scenes, it's awareness. Awareness of cameras even when they're not there. Awareness of reactions before they happen. Awareness that silence online feels louder than criticism. You start noticing how quickly moments are judged, how fast opinions form, how little time there is between amazing and overrated. And the scariest part, none of this depends on how hard you're working. You can be doing everything right, training, studying, taking care of your body, but perception doesn't wait for context. Once that realization hits, the game changes. You stop playing loose. You stop playing free. You start playing careful. And careful doesn't show up on TV, but it lives in your head. That's the illusion. Fans think pressure comes from boosts. In reality, it comes from applause, because applause turns into expectation. And expectation is the one thing you can never turn off. After a while, the pressure stops feeling external. It moves inside. It's not the crowd anymore. It's not the comments. It's the voice in your own head that never fully shuts up. You start replaying moments before they even happen. You imagine outcomes you haven't earned yet. You feel tension in situations that used to feel natural. You warm up, but your mind is already in the fourth quarter. You're present, but not fully. Focused, but tight. And the strange part is nobody around you notices. From the outside, you look composed, locked in, professional. Inside, you're carrying a constant awareness that one mistake can shift the conversation. That one missed shot can undo weeks of silence. That one bad stretch can become the clip everyone shares. Pressure changes how you experience time. Moments stretch longer than they should. Decisions feel heavier than they are. And rest doesn't feel like rest because your mind keeps working even when your body stops. You begin to understand why some players look different after success. Why joy fades before ability does. Why confidence can look steady while feeling fragile. Because pressure doesn't break you all at once. It wears you down quietly. It shows up when you're trying to sleep, when you're scrolling and shouldn't be, when you're asking yourself if you're doing enough, even on days you gave everything. And the hardest truth is this: you cannot talk about it openly, because the moment you acknowledge pressure, people call it weakness. They say that that's part of the job. They assume money or attention cancels out emotion. So you learn to carry it silently, to normalize it, to function with it sitting on your chest. That's when you realize something important. Pressure doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're standing somewhere that matters. But knowing that doesn't make it lighter. It just explains why it's there. At some point, you realize pressure doesn't come from not being good enough anymore. It comes from proving you still are. When you're climbing, people cheer effort. When you arrive, they demand results. The margin for error disappears quietly. Nobody announces it. You just feel it. A mistake that used to be a learning moment now feels like a warning sign. A bad night isn't part of the process anymore. It's what's wrong. And suddenly, you're not being compared to others. You're being compared to the best version of yourself every single night. That's exhausting in a way few people understand, because growth isn't linear. Confidence isn't permanent. And performance doesn't rise on command. But expectations do. They rise instantly. They rise unfairly. They rise without context. And once that happens, pressure stops being about competition and starts being about identity. You're no longer just playing to win. You're playing to protect who people think you are. That's when the joy starts slipping. You catch yourself playing safe instead of playing bold, choosing not to fail instead of choosing to win, thinking one step ahead of the moment you're actually in. On TV, it still looks clean, controlled, professional, but inside, it feels like walking a tightrope with no net. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. Pressure doesn't always come from critics. Sometimes it comes from supporters, from fans who believe so strongly that they forget you're human, from people who say, "I know you'll figure it out," without realizing how heavy that sentence can be. Because belief creates obligation, and obligation creates pressure. And once you're aware of that, you start understanding why so many great players look serious more often than joyful. Why smiles fade before skill does. Why success can feel lonelier than struggle. This is the stage where pressure stops being visible. No injuries, no scandals, no dramatic moments, just weight. And learning how to carry that weight without losing yourself is one of the hardest parts of playing at the top. Eventually, you stop trying to escape the pressure, so you realize it's not something you beat, it's something you learn to live with. At first, you think pressure will disappear once you prove yourself, once you win enough, once you belong. But that moment never comes. Instead, pressure evolves. It becomes quieter, more personal, less about what people say and more about what you expect from yourself. You start holding yourself to a standard nobody else can see, a version of excellence that exists only in your head. And even on good days, it whispers that you could have been better. And that's when you understand why rest feels different now, why days off don't feel fully off, why even success doesn't feel like release. Because pressure doesn't leave when the game ends. It follows you into recovery, into conversations, into silence. And yet something changes when you stop fighting it. You stop asking, "How do I get rid of this feeling?" and start asking, "How do I move with it?" You learn to separate effort from outcome, to respect bad days without letting them define you, to accept that confidence isn't loud, it's steady. That's growth people never applaud. It doesn't come with headlines. It doesn't trend. It doesn't show up on TV. But it's the difference between surviving pressure and being shaped by it. This is where maturity begins. Not when pressure disappears, But when it stops controlling every decision you make, over time, you realize pressure isn't random. It shows you exactly where you are. You don't feel this weight at the bottom. You don't feel it when nobody's watching. Pressure only exists where expectations live, and expectations only live where you matter. That understanding doesn't make things easier, but it makes them clearer. It reframes the experience. Instead of asking why the pressure feels so heavy, you start asking what it's asking of you, what habits need tightening, what routines need discipline, what parts of your mindset need to mature. Pressure becomes feedback. It tells you when you're drifting. It tells you when you're avoiding discomfort. It tells you when you're relying on talent instead of preparation. The hardest lesson is accepting that pressure will never feel comfortable. And that's okay. Comfort was never the goal at this level. Growth was, and growth always lives just outside of comfort. You start finding stability in things that don't change. Your work ethic, your routines, your values, those become anchors when noise rises, when opinions swing, when moments don't go your way. You learn that pressure cannot touch what's built on consistency, and slowly, almost without noticing, confidence starts to return. Not the loud kind that announces itself, the quiet kind that shows up when it's needed, the kind that doesn't panic under scrutiny. That's when you realize something important. Pressure didn't arrive to break you, it arrived to prepare you. And once you understand that, the game feels different. Again, not lighter, but steadier and more honest, more intentional. You stop chasing relief. You start trusting readiness. At some point, you stop measuring pressure by how heavy it feels. You start measuring it by how well you can carry it. Not every night feels free. Not every moment feels confident. But you learn that confidence isn't the absence of pressure, it's the ability to move forward with it anyway. That's the part TV never shows. They don't show the quiet nights where you sit with your thoughts. They don't show the mental reps that happen after the physical ones end. They don't show the discipline it takes to stay grounded when attention keeps pulling you in every direction. Pressure doesn't disappear when you succeed. It sharpens, and learning how to live inside that space without letting it harden you is what separates people who flash from people who last. If you're watching this and feeling pressure in your own life, understand something important. Pressure isn't proof that you're failing. It's proof that what you're doing matters. The goal isn't to escape it. The goal is to grow strong enough to carry it without losing yourself. That's what the best players learn. That's what TV never explains. And that's what makes the difference long after the highlights fade. If you want more honest conversations about the reality behind performance and sports and beyond, stay here, subscribe. Because the stories that matter most are usually the ones you never see on screen.